who did not like public education. Your options with charters or a private are very, very limited in rural America. So we must continue to invest in the public education. You know, we've got a situation now where these schools have been cutting. You know, you've seen increased class sizes. You've seen teachers cut, and less qualified teachers being brought in for budgetary reasons. You're seeing extracurricular activities being cut to the point where students have to pay. Their parents are forced to pay to have extracurricular activities. What this is doing, this is being done by design. These Republicans in both Lansing and in Washington are cutting education to the point where parents are making the logical decision to pull their kids out and be put into charter or into private education. And and too often those entities are for-profit entities, and that is not something that is going to serve Northern Michigan or the UP or frankly over our country well. Education is a right, and it's something that the state must fund, and it's not something that we should be handing over to for-profit entities. It's a different motive once that happens, and that motive, your children are not the same held at the same priority.
And Gary asked, what's the federal role in?
Well, I think when you look at the Department of Education, their role and responsibility oftentimes is to tell the various to lay the federal guidelines whereby our school boards and the state entities that regulate education must meet. And we cannot have a weakening of those regulations to benefit for-profit and charter schools. I can tell you broadly, I believe in public education, and anything that would harm that should be stopped. Yes.
I know that ISIS and quite a few terror cells in Africa are directly funded by the drug trade. Is there anything that you do in Congress to combat that's not kind of like the Reagan era war on drugs, or do you have a solution for that? Because that's where they're getting their funding. A lot of these terror groups.
They're getting their funding from oil, from territories that they've taken over. This and we've as far as how we address ISIS, what we've had out of the Bush administration, and I don't know how many you've seen Jeb Bush talking about continuing Bush 1's policies. This military intervention in the Middle East must stop. It's not working. ISIS is being funded by the territories that they're controlling, by the governments that we put into power. In Iraq, we've got a prime minister there that is not funding their own military to defeat ISIS. America has got to play a larger role with those leadership, but the role there is one of guidance, not one of military intervention. Talk is better than war, and we've got to have a foreign policy that recognizes that. President Obama has continuously chosen to negotiate, and because of that, I believe that the Middle East and America is safer versus a military intervention. That being said, we have to realize that the war on terror is not it's not about geography any longer. The war on terror is not about a map. The war on terror is about understanding where the threats come from, isolating those threats, and neutralizing them. Sometimes that will require a drone strike or some other sort of finite military intervention. But sending 200,000 and 300,000, 400,000 troops on the ground to fight the war on terror is not a solution that's been working. We are not a safer country by many of the policies that we saw out of this Bush administration.
Those are our Humvees that are riding around there.
Yeah, ISIS has taken over. It's created a vacuum was created in the Middle East, and that vacuum, unfortunately, in many ways, in Egypt, in Lebanon, in Libya, the West Bank, Iraq, has been filled by Islamists. We have to address that in different ways other than sending troops on the ground. Yes.
a lot of the things that we've been talking about require funds. And I don't think it's a winning strategy to propose raising taxes. But we've got a defense budget that's so large that we could cut it by 50% and still have more than the next 5 countries combined. So that seems like a ready source of funds. How are you going to convince people that cutting the defense budget will still allow for a strong defense?
I don't know that cutting the defense budget is the answer towards our problems. I will say that we've got to get smarter about how we're investing. We have to, again, I'm running for Congress from the 1st Congressional District. My mandate, my job will be every morning will be to wake up and try to create a Northern Michigan and a UP where our families can stay and succeed. The way I see that to be done is investing in and protecting our people, our land, and our Great Lakes, specifically rail service, high-speed internet, mobile phone service, and a water institute. Our job is to unleash the potential of you. You know, government isn't in the business of creating jobs. Government is in the business of allowing and getting you the resources to open up so that you can be productive. Now, you know, obviously there is an enormous amount of waste in the government, and you know, in all departments, not just in the Department of Defense, that could help this. But we also have to figure out we need a smarter tax code. You know, if you want to talk about revenue increases in government, you need to look at Wall Street. We've got these hedge fund operators that are paying a capital gains rate of 15%, while their secretaries and their assistants are paying 28 and 30%. We've got to have a fair tax code. You know, Senator Levin has talked about that extensively. We've got a hedge funds and private equity funds and other investment vehicles that are being taxed at a rate much lower than people who work for a living. If you want to talk about where we're going to get new funds, right there is where you do it. Yes, sir.
So looking ahead, 13, 14 months from now, I guess, are there a couple things that you could say about your opponent, Mr. Benishek, that you